Happy Friday, everybody. Today is Friday, September 10th, 2021, and this is your Friday planning video. So as we're closing in on the final quarter of the year, I want to update you on some possible things we need to keep an eye on, and I want to go through just a couple of general planning principles that we've talked about before. I want to revisit them a little bit today and things we're going to talk about in the coming months. So first, let's talk about Washington. Now, I spoke about the risk of the tax changes that are coming down, or at least being talked about on the Monday market video, but let me remind you that we do not give specific tax advice. We do look forward to working with your tax advisors on your specific plans. I will leave the infrastructure acts aside for a minute. We've touched on them. Let me talk about the Secure Act 2.0. We've talked about that once before, but let me remind you of some things we may need to start planning for, not act on yet, because there's still a lot of work to be done here, but think about, we'll talk about planning for. So first, RMD, Required Minimum Distribution. It's being discussed again. Now remember earlier last year, the RMD age, when you needed to start taking RMD, was moved from 70 and a half to 72. There's talk right now to move that up again, 73 in 2022, 74 in 2029, and 75 in 2032. So that's the reason, one of the reasons why we wait till later in the year before we start taking RMDs. But I don't know about you, but the government's starting to plan for 2032. I don't really know about that. But also, let's talk about the next things, catch-up provisions. I mentioned this a few weeks ago also. There's talk about raising the catch-up provisions. Remember, the first catch-up starts at age 50. They're talking about adding a catch-up provision between age 62 and 64 up to as high as $10,000 a year. So again, remember, we always talk about putting money into tax-deferred plans. It's not always the perfect solution, because remember, we talked about as well the importance of having a diversified tax plan, different tax statuses of your money. So that's something we'll talk about as that comes about. If it comes about, we'll talk about how to do that. Now, this one's actually very interesting, very cool. Student loan matching. We just heard this week that Amazon is actually going to pay for the education of some of its workers. Up to 750,000 workers actually qualify for that. And this provision will allow employers to make matching contributions to the 401k plan tied to the employee's student loan debt. So again, it's going to complicate things. Don't know exactly how this is going to work, but I've been saying for a while there's going to be something that makes this government get serious about student loans. Maybe this is it. We'll see if this goes. A lot of talk, but we'll see what goes on. There are a few other items being discussed. We'll keep you informed on that. It's a lot of talk left to be done on this before it passes, but there's some interesting ideas to keep in mind, and we'll talk about those as it goes. Finally, as I wanted to remind you, something we've been saying for the last couple of weeks. Now is the time we need to review the risk in your portfolio. We need to talk about where your risk level is and discuss if your risk tolerance and your time horizon, and most importantly, your goals, line up with the risks of your portfolio. There's a great article in the Wall Street Journal this week. I was talking about investors that were out there seeking unnecessary risks. It's important to remember, there is risk to no matter what we do in our investing. Even cash has risks, and that is, of course, inflationary pressures. So we've come a long way in this market. Remember, this is, and quickly, this is the fastest doubling of a market since March of last year. The S&P 500 has doubled since March of last year, quicker than any other time in history. And here, let me ask you, do you recall how scared you were in March of 2020 when the markets and the economy were at rock bottom? How about 2008, 2009? I can tell you, if you've been watching your account for the last 18 months and seeing the returns that you've seen, you probably can't remember how scared you were. And I will tell you, let's look at a quick little bit of math. If you had a 50-50 portfolio, 50% stock, 50% bonds, a year in the beginning of this year, with a 20% return of the S&P 500, you're at this point probably about 55% stock, 45% bonds, which of course is a difference in your risk scenario. So as the idea is, this doesn't include actually from last March. This is just from January. So you can imagine if you had a 50-50 split last March, then you can imagine what your risk looks like now. So the markets don't go up in a straight line. There are times to hold and not sell, even in volatile markets. But the most important thing we do is discuss what to expect and what we're going to do when that comes about. So please engage with me in those reviews that we do in the coming weeks. This is important stuff. We are at or near all-time highs, and remember, this is the time to keep planning. This is the time to review these things and not let our guards down. I'll be back on Monday with a market update video. Please feel free to pass these videos around. Remember, we're now on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and you can even read my monthly article in The Voice of Chicago, both written and online. I don't want to finish today's video before we do a quick acknowledgement of the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on our country. Much like generations before us, we experienced something 20 years ago tomorrow that forever changed our lives. Many of us at this point in time have really two sets of our life, before 9/11 and after 9/11. And there was, and the events of 20 years ago made us rethink how we live our lives. A lot of people are doing that again with the pandemic. They're rethinking exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it. So my thoughts at this time do go out to those who lost loved ones in the 9/11 attacks, and certainly all of the first responders who were, of course, the heroes of the day. Have a safe and a good weekend.